Yes, I can create a teaser video for your audio podcast. So I know working with an audio podcast is very difficult to create a teaser videos because you don't have any visual element to work with. But there are some other ways to go about it, like using the animated typography to animate each word the speaker was saying. But what if you don't have the time to do all of the animations? In this video, I'll show you how you can create an interactive teaser video for your audio podcast using After Effects. And I'll be animating some key elements on the media player to look like it's playing on a streaming platform. So without much further ado, let's dive into the video. Before we start animating in After Effects, the first thing we have to do is to create the user interface of the streaming platform in Illustrator. But it's not actually a streaming platform, it's just a media player that simulates how the podcast will be played on a streaming platform. Here in Illustrator, this is the design I'll be working with. It's just a simple design, straightforward. So this section right here, it gives you the picture of the podcast you're working with. And to the right of this podcast icon, we have the title of the podcast. Then below that, we have the date that the podcast will be posted and the name of the podcast. And I'm using my name here just for a sample. Then moving below, we have the control buttons like the play, the stop, the forward and backward, all of those things, and the time duration. So starting with this here, we have the playhead, which I'll be animating, and then the start time, which I'll be animating to match up the time here, which is 1 minute 52 seconds, depending on the audio. So depending on the audio that I'm working with, I'll change this time here to match it up. And I think the audio I'm working with will be 1 minute 16 seconds. And to the right of the control media, we have the name of the streaming platforms that will upload it here. And this space that I allow here, I will use it to animate the audio waveform. So the audio waveform is just an effect in After Effects that you can use to mimic the audio waves using some kind of lines or waves depending on what you want. So after designing everything and I know the elements that I'm to animate, which is the title, we have the playhead, the timer. Next is to isolate it on its own separate layer so it will be easy to animate in After Effects. So under this layer tab here, I have everything separated on its own layer. So this bottom layer here contains the elements that I will not animate, like the background, all of those things. Then the title is on its own separate layer, the podcast name on its own separate layer. Though I will not be animating the podcast name, but it's possible to do that. And then the timer, which will be the start time, is on its own layer, and the playhead on its own layer, so it'll be easy to animate it in After Effects. So we are done setting up everything in Illustrator. We have the user interface that we're working with, and we know the elements that we are to animate in After Effects. Now in After Effects, I'll add in the audio clip that I'll be working with. And if I press Ctrl K, you will see that the duration of this composition is 1 minute 16 seconds. That will be very useful because we'll be using that a lot to animate those elements, especially the timer. Now we have to add in the Illustrator file. So I'll just locate where I saved the Illustrator file and drag and drop it onto After Effects. It's very easy to do. And for the import kind, you just choose composition. And for the footage dimension, you choose the layer size and hit OK. Now nothing is being displayed here because I've not yet added it to the file. But what I'm going to do is that I'll double click on the teaser video. That's the new composition for the Illustrator file. And I'll have all of the layers as I prepared it in Illustrator. And as you can see, it also has the Illustrator logos to show that it's an Illustrator file or it's an Illustrator layer. Now we are done setting up everything from Illustrator and After Effects. The first element I'll be animating here is the start time. And the start time, I labeled it timer. But there's one thing, since these are just Illustrator layers, you cannot directly change the values of them. But what I'll do is that I'll create another text layer for the timer. So this is the text layer here, and I'll set up the timer time, which is 0 seconds. So I won't be needing this Illustrator timer layer, and I'll just hide this. Now, with the text layer selected, I hold Command and I click on the pan behind tool to censor the anchor point. Then to create the timer, I'll be using a script. And the script, I've already copied it to my clipboard, and I'll leave it in the description below so you can use it. To implement the script, the first thing you have to do is that you have to add in the slider control, and you can do that by going to the effects and presets, search slider control, drag and drop it onto the layer. Next thing is to open the source text. Hold the option key Then you click on the stopwatch icon to open the expression window and you paste in the script. Now, after doing that, you have to go to the File, Project Settings, then Expressions. And for that script to work, you need to change this expression engine to Legacy Extend Script. Under the Effects control, you will find the slider control and you find the slider which can be animated. So here's where the fun part begins. If I select this and then I control these sliders, the slider value, let's say if I increase the value, you see that the time here has been increased to 47 seconds, but I want it at 1 minute 16 seconds. So I'll keep increasing the slider value until it is 1 minute 16 seconds. When the slider value is at 76, the timer will be at 1 minute 16 seconds. Next thing to do is that I'll need to animate it so it starts from 0 seconds to 1 minute 16 seconds. So I'll set in the first keyframe for the slider control at the beginning of the timeline here. Then at the end of this timeline, I'll set in another value for the slider control. Move back to the second value, then I change it to 0. So it starts from 0 seconds to 1 minute 16 seconds. So that's how you can use this script to create a timer. And you can create a timer starting from a lower value to a higher value. Same as you can start it from a higher value to a lower value. It all depends on how you control the slider. So if you want it from a higher value to a lower value, you first of all set the first keyframe at a higher value, then the second keyframe, you set it at a lower value. So we are done setting up the start time, and the next thing we're going to do is to animate the playhead. And we'll be using one expression called the linear expression. And I did a video talking about the linear expression thoroughly. So I'll leave a link in the description so you can go and watch the full video. With the playhead, I want to animate just the X position. So what I'm going to do is that I'll press P for the position. Right click on this position and take separate dimension. So we now have the X position and the Y position. And for the X position, you know it animates it horizontally, and for the Y position, it goes vertically. Now, I'll need to know the start position of the timer and the end position. For the start position here, let me zoom in. If I bring the playhead, let's say here, I know that the start position is at 36.1. And for the end position, it's at roughly 542.1. After we're done knowing the start and the end position, we now need to know the start and the end time. And for the start time, it's pretty easy because we know it will start at 0 seconds. And for the end time, we need to calculate that because we are working with seconds, not minutes. And the duration of this composition, the duration of that auto clip is 1 minute 16 seconds. And to convert 1 minute 16 seconds, we just take 60 seconds plus 16 seconds. And that will give you 76 seconds. To implement the linear expression, same thing, I'll open the expression window by holding the Option key and clicking on the stopwatch icon on the X value. Then I'll type in linear. The first thing to add here is the time. And after the time, we now set in the duration. And the start duration is 0 seconds and the end duration is 76. After that, we have the start position, which is at 36.1. And the end position is at 542.1. Immediately as I click out of the expression window, you see that the playhead is at the start position. But this is not actually the start position because it has a little space behind. So we can change this to about, let's say, 34, or let's just put it at 32. So the start position should be at 32. Now we are done animating the timer and the playhead of the animation. The next to be animated is the position of the title. I'll be masking out the area that I want it to be displayed in, and I'll be using the loop out expression. And the loop out expression, I also talked about it in the video that I did, and I'll leave it in the description below, as I earlier said, with the linear expression. The first thing I'm going to do is that I first of all type in the full title name, and I'll just call it Animating a Teaser Video in After Effects. So after adding the full title, I'll now create the mask area. To create the mask is pretty easy. As we all know, you just come under this track map and we'll change this value here on top of the text map, on top of the text layer, we'll change this value to track map. just this area will be visible. I'll press P for the position, set in the first keyframe, then I move 15 seconds ahead. And let's say 30 seconds ahead, and I'll set in another keyframe. It must not be exactly 30 seconds, but somewhere around there. And at this position, I'll move the text so that everything will be viewed. So after doing that, I'll hold the Option key and click on this stopwatch icon. And then I add in the loop out expression. And we'll be adding the cycle for the parameter. Because I want to animate from the first keyframe to the second keyframe and back to the first keyframe before going to the second keyframe over and over. After animating the title, what we are going to do next is to add in the auto waveform, which is pretty easy to do. To add in the auto waveform, we'll first of all go to the main composition. Then we add in this Illustrator file here. We are not going to add it to the Illustrator composition, but to the main composition. And the first thing to do is to add in a solid layer. After adding the solid layer, we go to the Effects panel. Then in the Effects panel, we are going to search the audio waveform, drag and drop it onto the solid layer. The first thing to do is to first of all select the audio clip that we want to match the wave to. Clicking on this audio layer, we click on this here and we choose the name of the audio clip. Then we change the color to white. After changing the color to white, we can now change the height of the wave, because right now it just has some kind of short lines. Now we can reposition it first somewhere around here and even reduce the size of the solid layer. We can change the display option from analog lines to digital lines and increase the height of the line. You can play around with all of these options here to see what you can do to modify the audio waveform. But for this tutorial, I'll just leave it at this level. Hope you found the video interesting and helpful. And if you did learn something new today, to implement it in your next project, and leave a feedback in the comment section below. I'll be there to read it and leave a reply. Just subscribe so you won't miss the next video from me, and like the videos to support the channel grow. Thanks for watching, and on to the next one. Keep editing.